The third sort of the relative adverb is the adverb how. The speaker links the subordinate clause to describe the way that the subject in the main clause actualizes the definition of the verb to the condition that the subject in the main clause attains from the way with the experience, condition, or action of the subject indicated by the definition of the verb in the subordinate clause. The subject of the subordinate clause actualizes the definition of the verb with the way. And the subject of the subordinate clause linked by the relative adverb how attains a certain condition from the way that the subject actualizes the definition of the verb. For example, I can ask you a question like, how do you go to school? Then the listeners can respond me in the two ways. The first response is about the way that you are assigned to take to actualize the action indicated by the intransitive verb go. So the response would be like, I go to school on foot. I go to school by subway, or I go to school by bus. The second response is about your condition when you actualize the definition of the intransitive verb go. So the response would be like, I go to school happily. I go to school in a fresh mood. Or I go to school in gratitude. In this perspective, we can understand that the relative adverb has the inclusive definition to indicate a way. In the example, the transportation to actualize the definition of the intransitive verb go to a condition that the subject is concluded to after the subject actualizes the definition of the intransitive verb go. So we can understand the way and the condition in a continuous way that can be indicated by the adverb how. The relative adverb how is able to be interpreted ambiguously because the relative adverb how is able to indicate both the way that the speaker actualizes the definition of the verb and the condition that the subject who actualizes the definition of the verb attains from the way. The speaker links the subordinate clause to the main clause with the phrase of the noun the way to indicate only a way that the subject in the subordinate clause actualizes the definition of the verb. So the speaker who avoids the ambiguity of the indication by the relative adverb how applies the phrase of the noun the way to indicate a way of the subject to actualize the definition of the verb in the subordinate clause. There are three sentences at a conference. The first sentence is this: how Jesus Christ treats me is the same as how I treat my beloved friend. As we can understand the inclusive indication by the relative adverb how, we can understand that the relative adverb how can indicate both the precedent and the relative adverb how. We can see a precedent ahead of the relative adverb is not stated because the relative adverb can indicate the precedent all at once. There are two subordinate clauses applied in the sentence. The first subordinate clause is this: how Jesus Christ treats me. And the second subordinate clause is this: how I treat my beloved friend. This description is about the first subordinate clause. The speaker links the subordinate clause, how Jesus Christ treats me, to the main clause. With the relative adverb how to indicate the subject of the be verb in the main clause, as the way that the subject Jesus Christ actualizes the definition of the transitive verb treat. To the condition that the definition of the transitive verb treat is from the way in the subordinate clause, how Jesus Christ treats me. The speaker can indicate a way that the subject actualizes the definition of the transitive verb treat to the condition after the subject actualizes the definition of the transitive verb treat. This description is about the second subordinate clause. The speaker links the subordinate clause, how I treat my beloved friends, to the main clause. How Jesus Christ treats me is the same as how I treat my beloved friend. We can see that the subordinate clause and the main clause are inseparable, with the relative adverb how to indicate the way that the speaker as the subject actualizes the definition of the transitive verb treat to the condition that the definition of the transitive verb treat is actualized from the way as the object of the preposition as. To receive the definition of the preposition as from the subordinate clause, how Jesus Christ treats me, as the subject of the preposition as. In the subordinate clause, how I treat my beloved friend. The speaker intends to indicate the way that the speaker actualizes the definition of the transitive verb treat in the subordinate clause to the condition that the speaker as the subject attains after the actualization of the transitive verb treat from the way. The speaker who states the sentence, the subordinate clause, how Jesus Christ treats me with the object of the preposition as, that is the other subordinate clause. How I treat my beloved friend. The preposition as is applied to a subject that is to define a subject or an object. So the subordinate clause, how Jesus Christ treats me, and the other subordinate clause, how I treat my beloved friend, are equivalent. A subject or an object